I think that a media reform or establishing a new media is the most important and pressing issue for every progressive in this country and worldwide.
Not only the recognition that media is necessary for a functional democracy, which everyone who ever writes about the media says, but also that all institutions, media institutions themselves, need to be democratically accountable in a way that the current media system simply is not.
We've got a real systematic institutional problem with the media here in the UK, and that plays such an important role. I mean, again, when we're talking about the issue of Palestine, for example, the media is a key pillar of complicity in the ongoing atrocities that we see taking place in Gaza at the hands of the Israeli military forces. And so to have festivals like this, it's not just about media, it's about so much more.
Journalists are very good at holding other institutions to account, water boards or the government or trade unions or whatever, but I do think that the media has to be held to account, and the media has so many failings, and we have to explore those failings and work out what we can do about it. Some of them you can't do anything about. A lot of it flows from lack of money and so on. But the more that we look in and say, look, this is not going right, we're not representing people like this, we're not asking these kind of questions, we're not challenging people in authority enough, why aren't we doing that? All of those kind of things I think is valuable, and in the long term I like to think will strengthen us.
Of course, all of these other issues, health, education, war, are vitally important. But unless we reform our media in key ways, we will never actually win some of those arguments either, because they are all distorted and framed in particular ways in our mainstream media, as we've heard all day.
The media is not very good at holding itself to account. It tends to run away. There's a kind of protective instinct, because if you start attacking fellow journalists, you seem to be attacking the nature of news and reportage itself. So I think that this gives an environment where some of those difficult questions can be asked and people can start to think through some of those answers. So I think it is a valuable space. I think the challenge for spaces like this is how you get those thoughts out into the mainstream, and so people are aware that these kinds of things are being discussed.
You can go to somebody and say, well, I don't like what you guys are doing about such and such a subject, and they'll say, well, where's your evidence that we're doing it badly or we're doing it wrong? And I think what we do at the Centre for Media Monitoring is provide that evidence base. And it's great to see that it prompts discussions like this.
There are many problems in the media. That's why the Media Reform Coalition exists, and there are many pressing problems. But GB News is an expression of a changing media environment, and it's an interesting problem, and I hope our four speakers are going to convince you of this. But it'd be weird to think that a channel that is bankrolled by a hedge fund cash, one that has generated all sorts of complaints, thousands and thousands of complaints, one that amplifies Tory MPs, to think that this isn't a problem would be odd.
What they've done on GB News is quite extraordinary. I mean, if you look at the presenters, they're almost exclusively Conservative or Brexit Party politicians, and I think I'm the only person who's actually compiled anything like a list on this.
Faisal, you said, I mean, there's a place for this broadcaster, there's a place for this platform. People are tuning in because they are being ignored by other people, and I think having that debate, having more voices is a key perhaps to reducing some of the division and hate being referenced earlier, and actually referring to our work, which I think is legitimate, as promoting tropes and conspiracy theories, is far more censorious and damaging to journalism than asking for Ofcom to shut us down.
Just within the last week, we've had all politicians unite against the idea that foreign governments should own our newspapers, which is absolutely correct. But then it's so easy to make the next step and say, well, perhaps giant corporations shouldn't own large portions of our press, or perhaps media moguls who have interest in all these different pots and are so clearly having an excessive and abusive influence on our politics, they also shouldn't own major parts of our media.
The UK is going through an incredible period of change in which the media landscape and ownership of media platforms is at the heart of an awful lot of the disputes and discussions. Coming together like this means that progressive voices are able to influence whether it be political party manifestos or public debate when those issues are at the fore. What's got to happen is it's got to happen more often, it's got to happen in a more detailed way, and it's got to happen with as broad a range of progressive voices in the room as possible.
I think it was good to have a broad amount of voices in terms of different backgrounds and kind of dissecting the extent of the media bias and also the question from the audience in terms of trying to find solutions. I think that was the main theme throughout, is that people always want solutions rather than sit there and just dissecting, and whether it's optimism or pessimism, there is still there was a need and an urgency today. You could sense people want solutions, they want change, and they want to kind of discuss and debate how to bring about that change.
Everybody agrees that there needs to be reform within the media, and without kind of discussing, getting the different perspectives, coming to some common ground to see how we can build coalitions really and work together to achieve a common goal, which is one, raising the standards of journalism, making it more democratic, ensuring that local, national are represented, and that, you know, it's serving the British public at the end of the day. And I think the Media Reform Coalition does this really well.
You know, there are people here who are probably working, you know, on their own in media, running their own independent media, freelance journalists, people who maybe don't have a kind of a ready-made ecosystem of people around them on a regular basis who can remind them that the work they're doing is worth it. The work they're doing is important. It's important to keep pushing for change, for reform, for, you know, a revolution in the way in which we do media. So I think these spaces are just important in terms of giving us that hope and optimism to basically keep going and doing what we do.